In three, two, one, you're live.
Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. And I have double girlfriends on this call. Leslie Westbrook got in touch with me and said, our mutual friend, Penny Paine, just wrote a book about Dennis Spangler. She's going to be premiering the book at Sacred Space in Carpinteria. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I was so excited because, wait just a minute. Hold on a sec. Um, so, Penny, years ago, uh Dennis sold me this. He made this.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, so Dennis sold me this and I have this on my sofa as we speak. I mean, he made that. And so you can't see this, dear listener, but Dennis was a textile artist and he did his own designs that were so interesting, kind of a cross between I don't know, a museum quality artist and a hippie. And so, but really interesting. I loved knowing him, didn't know him well. Penny knew him real well. Leslie Westbrook, also a girlfriend of ours, knew him real well. That's one of two pillows that he made for me. And so when I heard that you were writing a book on him, it was like, how exciting, because he's a person that is a local and a super important person, just like a lot of important people here in Santa Barbara, Penny. They're important elsewhere. And in Santa Barbara, they're like, okay, they're just a guy. It's just somebody there, that we know he's an artist, but, you know, but in other parts of the world, in other, areas, Dennis was a big name. And so I'm so excited to hear about the book. I'm so excited that he's coming into a place of notoriety. What did they say that is it the heroes, the local heroes are the last to be acknowledged or something like that? What's the expression, Penny?
Don't know that expression, but I did say that in the introduction that I felt it was he was worthy of being remembered, and that his. But the interesting thing is, since I started the project 8 years ago, you can't believe how many pieces of fabric have been shown to me. A pillow just now, many, many things. People are walking around still with his fabrics or his jewelry or his artwork or his funny curiosities he made. So yes, I'm glad. I don't know how you found him first, but I
I
met him.
think I think it was you and I. You had me up to the little place that you had up in Montecito. We had tea, and then you talked about a dentist, and I thought, how is
Oh,
I love tech. I think it was because you mentioned his name, and I knew, I knew that there was somebody that did wonderful textile art because, in what I do, I was in everybody's house all the time,
yes, you
and
probably
so
saw some of it, and you
I
knew a
did.
lot
I
of
think
people.
I think I saw something of his, and then you mentioned, and then when I was over at your place, you had some things that I think you had a box of his textiles, your little box, and
Yeah.
we went through it, and I thought, oh, how fascinating, how interesting. I can remember. I don't know if I told you this, but I was in the Peace Corps in Nigeria. I was at the edge of the Sahara, and I happened to be in a position of buying local boutiques that
Hmm.
were absolutely gorgeous. And they're just a local artist. I never really found out much about the artist. I brought home probably 10. They were wall size boutiques and really interesting. The tradition of textiles in Africa, the Dutch wax prints, for example.
Dennis was very influenced by a mud cloth too, which is created by men, isn't it? And so he loved that, where they color, they do their designs in mud on the basic cloth. Yeah, so I think you see a little bit of that coming out in his work.
I
There's
do. So that's why I brought it up. And
yeah.
it was interesting. This sort of segues, Penny, to what the world thought about textile art at a certain point. Now it's become, I mean, Amaral's wonderful weavings are the central piece of the Guggenheim, and I
Oh,
mean, so we've had a resurgence of textile art. But I remember this was, I guess, in the 80s. I had a theft, and all of my boutiques were stolen. And I had them insured as art. And the insurance company said, they're not art. We're not going to pay for them as art. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. They are. And so, I mean, the world has changed. Now we think of works that, for example, like Dennis Spangler did as totally works of art. But I'm talking too much. I was so excited to talk to you about this that I went off on a tangent about Africa. But start at the beginning. Tell us about, this is 8 years in the making, the book. And I know you as a children's book author. I have purchased things for my grandkids that you've done secretly. I haven't told you, but at any rate, now we've got Dennis, and I want you to start at the beginning. Tell me about Dennis's life.
Okay, well, Dennis was born in 1953 at St. Francis Hospital, and his father worked for Safeway. He was a produce manager originally, and he had a brother, an older brother called Billy, and they lived all over Santa Barbara, various streets, and ended up with a house in Goleta. And Dennis went to Dos Pueblos High School. He was always a cute, blonde, curly-haired boy. And it would seem from I've got lots of quotes in the book, that he was always more attracted to jewelry and things that sparkled and fabric. And there's a picture in the beginning of the book, and he's got a fur boa around his shoulders. Not that you'd really notice it immediately. It looks like a cat, but it's actually not. He loved to dress up, and his little friends on the gang, the gang friends, didn't like him because he didn't want to go and fix bikes and kick balls around. So he did quite well at school. He did organic gardening. He was very, very tall, and he preferred to hang out with the girls. And then he eventually he signed up, as he would do, from high school into City College. But he had a very bumpy time in the 70s, the early 70s, because sadly his mother jumped off the bridge um, on the way to Solvang, and she killed herself. So he was left without a mother. So that was really the beginning of a difficult era for him. But he stuck it out. He went to City College, and he didn't actually graduate with anything, and he didn't have a lot of formal education, but he did get to know a really well-known group in Santa Barbara, and that was Michael Gonzalez and the Solstice Group and Greg Paget. And so he got friendly with them. And that was really the first time that he had an opportunity. He was already making fabrics. He'd already thought about using wood blocks. He'd already thought about, any type of scrap of fabric. He was obviously a bit of a loss because he didn't have any parental support then. But those were different times, and he managed to survive. But he did banners, and he helped with the solstice parade. So that gave him a public arena for the first time. And his beautiful banners were hanging around the courthouse, etc., etc. And that was his beginning. And he realized that he had the physique for large lengths of fabric. He could hang those hangings that you had from Africa, probably himself with two arms. And he just went from strength to strength. And there was an interior designer in town, Richard Byers, who must have been the first one who really noticed Dennis's work. And he and a man called Charles Whitt, who was working for him, they gave him his first little exhibit at Byers' studio. And from then he got into well, that was a wonderful time. There were a lot of architects in town. There was a lot of, wealthy people who wanted something special, and the color was coming back. If you look at the history of, textile designs, we were starting to bring color back. We had got through a phase where now we could be more bold. We could bring art into our living rooms. We could actually wear it. We could carry it. This is early Vivienne Westwood and all those things. He was very influenced by that. I think he was very influenced. I know he talked to me a lot, and I have pieces of it right here of Fortuny fabric too, which of course is a secret, how they produce it, but I know he was trying to replicate that. So from there, he met all the wonderful architects, Jack Warner, and then he got to know Waldo Fernandez down in LA, and he got an agent in Santa Barbara, and he just hit the big times because everybody wanted this beautiful, free, creative design on silk, on cotton, on linen. And most interestingly, I struggled for years. I didn't even know where to start because I had no history to go off. He'd not written anything down. But I found 33 postcards with beautiful handwriting from all over the world, well, all over Europe and America, and they were from a woman called Sheila Ballantyne. And she was an actress, Shakespearean and a movie actress in England. She's still alive, but I cannot get to her. But she wrote to Dennis. She was quite a bit older than Dennis, but they obviously had a very special connection. And luckily, she gave me all the addresses that he was living at. So I started to piece together all the places he lived. I mean, I obviously knew the end of his life, but I didn't know anything at the beginning. And Leslie, fortunately, Leslie and I knew each other, and Leslie was always right there. She knew him a lot earlier than I did. She knew him from, they were both young teenagers, almost just into their 20s when they knew each other. So with her help, and she helped me in some ways, and other people did as well, we pieced it together. And so, yeah, he ended up doing work for Jim Nabors and for Mick Jagger and Frank Sinatra, you name it, Elizabeth Taylor. Everybody had a piece of his fabric or something, a
So,
chair, a pillow, something.
okay, so now your background. Now you are trained in fabrics, and you were a graduate of a very famous school, and something that we did not celebrate in the United States the same way. I mean, the history I can remember. You remember my son is Lachlan, and Lachlan's dad, his mom, well, Adrian is British, and his mom was a great needlewoman,
Yeah.
and did tapestries and did her own designs throughout her years, and it was considered. I remember meeting her, I was thinking, well, she's just puttering around with yarns, and but it was highly respected. She
Mhm.
was, she was the daughter of a noble person, and it was a thing where the women would be quite trained, and she knew so much about needlework. But anyway, tell me about your background because it kind of it collaborates well with Dennis's.
Well, yes, in some ways it does because, as you said, fabric artists were not considered artists initially. They were just considered fabric designers. And Dennis has a wonderful quote in the book where he says he believes his work is art. It's as if he has 1,000 canvases before him and he creates art. And that's what he wanted. And it lives on. I think it's actually a wonderful way to be an artist because um, people are out there in Santa Barbara. You might go to one of the craft fairs and see one of his beautiful table runners on the table with somebody's pottery on it. So, we capture pictures when we go out there. So my background was that I was one of the first 14 young women, girls in England to actually go to the University of London Goldsmiths College and receive an embroidery degree. We have an actual degree in embroidery. It was the first time they allowed that to happen, and I did a retrospective in 19, well, I can't remember when it was now. Yes, 2018, because that was our 50th anniversary. And I gathered together I got most of the people, I could track them down. So I had a little bit of practice. Before I did Dennis's book, I'd had a little practice for myself. And we had an exhibit in London. And the funny thing is, what you just said about art was what we had it was the thread all the way through it. It's called Threading Our Way. And it was how all of us had used our embroidery in different ways, but that ultimately the embroidery was our artistic expression. And although we didn't, lots of us taught, lots of us did other things. I ended up doing books mostly, but the embroidery was important. And we have a love of the fibers and the texture and the sculptural quality of fabrics. And Dennis did some things that you perhaps didn't see, like beautiful, beautiful. This is on a heavy silk fabric, and it's this that's just done with printed with like a stencil, and so and a block, and so it's
Wow.
very beautiful. But he also did so many other designs. You know, the one on the book, we have this big piece that's on I don't know where my camera is. There it is.
Yeah, I can see.
So but even on a piece of fabric there is a texture, and there's a different quality. But he did do paintings, and he did some cardboard paintings. There's one in the book that he did for Zello, you know, the on State Street. And he had an exhibit there, and that's like it's like making fabric out. The cardboard becomes like his fabrics, and stuck together. So he really was, yeah, all the time we learn more and more things about him. But the thing that brought the Fortuny idea is that he created um, tables with the designs on. So if you can see this stuff is construction glue. And he would take a big piece of floorboarding and he would transfer his design onto the table with this glue. And then he had the design out, if you like, in a raised format. This is like doing rubbings, tomb rubbings. And then he would put the silk or the cotton or the linen or whatever he was using. He loved silk. He would make it wet and he'd stretch it over the tables. And then he would layer paint. He used a fabric paint, but sometimes some dyes as well, but mostly fabric paint. But he might dye something first, and he'd put it over the table, and then he'd dry it with dryers with lots of fans, and then he'd put another layer on it, and that way you got all these beautiful different layers of color in the fabric. And the design would hold the paint. It would make it's like resist.
Ah.
But he also did painting like he did on your pillow, where he just literally let the water and the paint go all over and make beautiful shapes and colors, and you see this lovely merging of the colors. But this tabletop, we call it tabletop. We don't know what to call it really. The resist, it's a glue resist. And he did that a lot, and that's what allowed him to produce. Can you imagine this? He stroked color and paint across tables, long, a floorboard. Those big sheets is about 12 foot, I think. So he could do lengths, he could do repeats, and he could just sweep the color across because he was so tall and he had long arms and big hands. And but he also dyed things, and he just as well as those stencil type that I just showed you, and wood blocks. He started doing wood blocks originally, and we have a couple of examples. But that's what he did. He did tie dye as well. So he was, but at that he had that strength. He had something special, and he loved to dress people with his clothing. He loved to make, draping and things, and he loved to make lots of jewelry. He sold a lot of this in later years. He did a lot of beading, and he did very tight. Just happened to have these pieces here, crusty, on wires. These sort of really labor-intensive work. It must have taken him hours to do it. Well, he did. He was always working. And then he would do things that were really like fun, where he'd put, it's like these circles and lines in silver and make a noise. And then he'd put things like putting a marble inside a piece of wire. This is just two marbles. It's a curiosity or an amulet, whatever you want to call it, or a talisman. But and so this is mine. He gave it to me, and it's always with me. But that's just two marbles in there. Probably got those from my kids. So yeah.
Well, Penny, I wanted to sort of talk about I can't tell you the name of my client, but I had a client that was instrumental in the very early days of solstice. And he had a big, beautiful house over by the bowl. And he had a 3-story staircase. And up the staircase was all the posters, every poster from every solstice, from the first, like birthday card to Michael Gonzalez.
Yeah.
And so, he had this massive collection of solstice art. And he talked about Dennis as well. This was about, I would say, 9 months ago. And he passed since then. The interesting thing is that so Santa Barbara has changed so much since those days, and he was talking about those very early days in Santa Barbara, and he was talking exactly about what you're talking about. The artist community, you were talking about Jack and some of the incredible designers who were doing things for Elizabeth Taylor, but at the same time they were hanging out with the other artists here in, salt of the earth. So, I mean, the climate must have, I wasn't here then, but climate must have been so different. And Dennis was a big part of that, I know. That early, so it gave Santa Barbara its flavor. And, my client who passed just recently was in despair of this, saying, I don't know what's happened to Santa Barbara. He served up to the last breath on the solstice
Oh, good.
uh, board. Yeah, and also on the bowl board. And he talked about the early days of the bowl. That was another one where it was a bunch of people. It wasn't anybody huge. It was a bunch of people that were pulling together for Santa Barbara to have an art-centered something or other. And I mean, the way, your book is coming out at, I think, a really pivotal time because I think we're starting to realize that that was a really interesting era and it didn't happen the same way anywhere else. But Santa Barbara, I mean, with the development of the bowl and with Solstice and some of the community arts that were happening around that time, that
Well,
Dennis
yeah.
was,
Yeah, we
yeah,
had wonderful programs, even at Junior League, which I came to Santa Barbara in 1974. And so we had Making Friends with a Great Work of Art. And then there was all the other creative arts project was really strong. Yeah, I think Dennis was one of many, and there are a lot of friends. I do want to say too that a lot of people died, a lot of his friends died because of AIDS. So he was when you read, I have a timeline that I created. It's just a rough, this is my guide. So it went, from a few things, I've got 3 pages and it's littered with, unfortunately, losses of really special people, photographers, other artists, interior designers. Obviously, Michael Gonzalez was another one. And yes, he was in that set, and it was a very exciting time. He did his work is in 2 movies. So okay, there's a relationship, isn't there, between Santa Barbara and Hollywood still. I mean, obviously now they're all with us, but before there was always that special quality. And I'm sure that's how he met Sheila Ballantyne. And I'm sure that's how he got to know Carr, the movie producer. And I think that he ended up doing a necklace for Cher. He did fabric for Cher, and he did her airplane. She has a little jet plane with his fabric in it. Now we haven't been able to get any more pictures. That's the trouble. Dennis didn't leave me much. Obviously, there's very little written down, and not many pictures. But we've managed, and a lot of fabric still though. And as you know, we had that big sale where I mean, people who wanted fabric came and just sat on the floor and went through all those boxes. I still have some. So yes, it was
Richard's giving us the sign. We got to go to quick
okay.
break, but I want to talk about the Sheila Balanchine connection when we get back from the break. I think
Good,
that's fascinating. And
good.
then I didn't know that he designed Cher's upholstery for her plane. I did not know that. I had no idea. So interesting that connection. Okay, Richard, let's go to quick break.
Three, two, one. You're live.
So I'm talking with Penny Paine, Penelope Paine. I know her as a children's author and a friend of many of our friends and just in our circle of friends. I've known her on and off in regards to her authorship, but now she's taken on the project about 8 years in coming of a very well-known artist in Santa Barbara Dennis Spangler, and I know that Dennis was quite the genius, and I know that he was recognized in places outside of Santa Barbara. And Penny brought up the fact of his connection with Stila Balanchine. Talk more about that, Penny.
Well, the reason I could read her cards, and I could get, sort of figure out from the cards her role. So remember, this is right after he lost his mother, and so he was obviously in need, and he was very beautiful, and she was obviously a wonderful actress and person. I don't know how she came, but I know she had friends in Santa Barbara, but she met him. And I think she sort of was a comfort to him. And he was staying at the time, some of the time, he was staying at Ravenscroft, the big house next door to Ganowalska's Lotus Land. And so with Sheila, he explored different things because she would write to him from Milan or from somewhere else where she was working. She was an actress, a theatre actress as well as movies, but mostly I think she did a lot of Shakespeare, and so she would travel around and she would send him a card and she'd give him suggestions about what she'd seen and the type of art. So I think she was like a mentor for him. She was helping him see, because she sensed that Dennis, although he was wonderful in his own community, wouldn't travel much. He did in the end travel. He went to Thailand and he went to Rome and he came to England. But I think she was like a mentor, and she'd say, this is a wonderful color and this is very nice and this design is good and this artist is here. And so I think other people did that. I think some of Michael Gonzalez's troupe, as they call themselves, I think, they also were very supportive of Dennis and encouraged him to explore and create his own sort of style and brand. And he was found by Martex. He went to New York and Martex sheets. So he did a wonderful design that sold very well. We could go down to Robinson's and get it, or Macy's then. And it was called Eternity. I have a couple of pieces. I have a set and I have a couple of pieces, because you can go on eBay now, and find, every now and then you'll see a Spangler sheet or a Spangler pillowcase. So I'm trying to gather them up, sort of thing that you would do, Elizabeth. And so yeah, and so Sheila was a mystery person, and yet I could tell that she was special. So there's a funny picture of her, which I haven't put in the book, where she's dressing up and looks funny. But there's also a picture she sent of him, because she was here in London, and she sent a picture of her. And if you look carefully, you realize it's Dennis's fabric curtains behind her. So she would write to him, and she said, "Thank you for the packages." So Dennis made the effort to send her, wherever she was in the world, a jacket or a pair of curtains or whatever, because he did do jackets and shirts and things, not really commercially, but he would paint them. And I don't, you should have trained me earlier, because I didn't keep all the things that I had. I had a jacket and I should have kept it. But Leslie has some. Leslie probably has a lot of stuff hidden away. She every now and then she says, "Oh, I've just found a shirt," So he has a whole fan group, of course, and a lot of people knew him, and we didn't all know each other. So that was really special. Dennis treated us all as if we were a gem. And Leslie wrote a beautiful piece at the end of the book, the coda. And she wrote about that, how Dennis was able to keep each of us as a treasure on his studio desk. And we were his friends and his support. He needed us. And that was really important. And so Sheila was, for many years, I suppose she was still around, but then I think she's about 98 now, 96 to 78. So she was a key person, but we don't have her to talk to and ask, but we have her beautiful cards. She had lovely handwriting.
Penny, it's fascinating to me that this book, I mean, it's great that we're starting to recognize this era of Santa Barbara and this era of Santa Barbara artists. So it's going to be at Sacred Space.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Because,
tell us it.
because that used to be the trading post, and that's where Dennis lived and worked for some years.
Okay. Okay. And that's 2 to 4.
Yeah, 2 to 4 on Sunday the 17th.
Okay. So 2 to 4 on Sunday, the 17th at Sacred Space. And you'll be doing a book signing, no doubt.
Well, I'm not actually signing books because it's Morris, but I'm there with books, and we have several things that everybody gets a bookmark with 2 pieces of fabric that I made for them, and there'll be some samples of fabrics and packets, some giveaways, and also the bags that I've been making. Maybe somebody might like one of those, and the books and a few other odds and ends that we have that will be available. And then obviously my goal is to hopefully is to allow the giveaway to the organizations in Santa Barbara copies of this book so that it serves as a resource and as an archive. And as you said, now we're more interested in the in those fiber arts, the fabric arts, and so that would be really important. And I have obviously got some samples of fabric. There's so much to keep, but I have as much documentation as I can do. I'm getting on now, so I have to I have to make sure it gets to a safe place. So the museum
Well,
maybe have a copy, and yeah. So obviously they'll be available to people if they want to buy some too. We don't have a lot of copies yet, but it's print on demand, so we can get more. So
well, interestingly enough, another thing that I wanted to mention to you was the resurgence of the importance of archival material. Um, that is something that is in my world recently. The Bancroft, for example, and some of the great California museums, they become so interested in archives. I'm not just talking about paper. I'm not talking about, manuscripts. I'm not talking, not that kind of archive, but archives of documents that make a narrative, that create a narrative of California. So I give you 3 examples and why it's important, I think, that you're archiving, in a sense, Dennis's work.
that's what I did.
Yeah. Number one is I did an appraisal of a house that was going to be for sale, and it was an old adobe, and it was from a family that had developed the formula for the adobes that fixed the De La Guerra Plaza and the courthouse tower. So they were longtime masons, I guess you could call them, and had developed in ancient history in Mexico, this specific way of making the adobe that they brought to Santa Barbara
Right,
early on in the
right,
teens and the 20s. And that family lived forever in Santa Barbara. So they had an archive, and they, like a lot of Santa Barbara families, they married East Coast people. So it was the Californios and the East Coast folks that were getting together, and the East Coasters of that family had money, and they had a cherished daughter in the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s that was going to be married, and that was before the California connection was made. But this family had a whole archive of Worth, the fabric designer and the dress designer.
right, right.
And so her wedding gown was created by Worth, and she had her whole trousseau,
Oh, fantastic.
all the lace work, the Battenberg, the pantaloons, the undergarments,
Mm.
all of that was, created by the House of Worth, part of her trousseau. And lo and behold, here it turns up in this, adobe in Santa Barbara. And the family who inherited were like, let's just, they had a big dumpster out back. Let's just get rid of
Yep.
it. They had
Oh,
no idea, and because, anyway, so what I did was I said, okay, this is important. I dug through the dumpster, got it back out, and I said, this is important. And I called the Santa Barbara Historical Society, and I said, I think I've got a whole collection of Worth And its connection with Santa Barbara is the connection between, the Californio family and the
Family,
very
yeah.
wealthy Bostonians. And they were there in like 5 minutes,
Mhm.
and said, yeah, it said, okay. And so I convinced the family to donate the collection. But, that was the important thing that I could have, if they wanted to, they could have monetized that collection. They could have sold that collection
Sure,
because archives, now that people are just not doing paper and they don't care about the disposable things, the compostable things, the organic things like textiles, they're letting them go because they don't understand that the aggregate of the collection is more than just the collection. It tells a story, it tells the narrative. So archival material is so hot on the market now. It's selling for so much. People are like, okay, Elizabeth, you're telling me that my great grandmother's collection of her sketches of herbs, Santa Barbara herbs from the 1890s, you're telling me that's valuable? Oh, yes, it is. And so we're starting to rediscover archives. That's number one. Number two is we're starting to discover that our world has gotten so fast that indeed things from the 70s, I mean, you and I are like, okay, that was yesterday. But things of the 70s, that was an important formative time in the history of art in in California in general, Central Coast and Southern California. And so that era is becoming hot and collectible. And the outre art, what they trove art, the found art of the period, is also becoming something that people are paying for, and also museums and archives are collecting. I mean, I can't tell you what the Bancroft pays. We had a collection um, that was lost to the world in Plumas County, and I did the appraisal of the museum that was burnt in one of the fires, one of the California fires.
all right, yes.
But they had some of the early shopkeepers' manuals from the gold rush era. And they had a whole collection sequentially, how they used to do in the bound leather,
Yeah,
books.
sure.
And they had those. And, people were like, okay, I'm sorry they burnt, but it's not as important as, The Jumping Frog of Calaveras County by Twain, the second edition. Oh, wait a minute. It is so much more valuable. And, and then so when I started to interview, people like the Bancroft about what would you have paid for such a things, they were like, that's irreplaceable. I mean, we can't even tell you because, and so the world is starting to think, because we're all digital now, because everything is no longer paper, no longer documents, no longer, things that you treasure and put away in a cedar chest. Those things are gone. So those things are important in the market right now, Penny, which is when Leslie told me about your book, it was like, yes, there now we're documenting.
Yes, and so the book, of course, is digital, really. I mean, it doesn't have to be a book. You can read it online. It's not been put online yet, but ultimately it might end up there. But yes, and obviously the thing is to save a few of the treasured pieces, and so that we have an actual physical archive that goes with it. And I'm very interested in that. I missed my vocation. I probably should have started doing it a lot longer earlier, but I'm doing another archive with about Advocacy Press. Remember the press that put together all the children's books, and
Oh,
that's important too because we were also politically, obviously, because it was a part of the second wave maybe of feminism or whatever, where we were addressing girls. We were only really working with girls, but um, it does have a place. And so the formal academic piece of that is done, but I've been doing the anecdotal stuff, and there are plenty of people to talk to and record. So that's another archive I'm doing. And Itoko Maeno is still teaching art at the Museum of Art. Wonderful Itoko. You know her for the
yes.
many years. She and I have known each other for eons, since the 70s when we both came to town. And she's done most of my books, and she's many of my products that I put together for the weddings as well. and for many other authors. And she'd done illustrations. And she came to me with her artwork and said, I don't know what to do with all this. I've nowhere to store it, and I'm going to put it in the dumpster. So it was another dumpster story. And I said, no, you're not. And so I have them. So I would love to put something together for Itoko too. She certainly deserves to be recognized. She's a brilliant watercolorist and has been a wonderful teacher for many children in Santa Barbara. So I've inherited that too. So I have to keep going. So I'm so happy to finish up Dennis. He'll be with me forever. And now I will finish up the Advocacy Press one. And I'm not sure where we can house that, but something will come up, I'm sure. And
I
then
think not only, now, Richard, you can chime in if you want, but I think it's what Penny's talking about, the advocacy press with, the advocacy of females, that were, sorely not empowered in early literature when I was in school, in children's books and such like. It was rare that you had a female that was heroic in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it was interesting because Penny, Richard will laugh. So I bought another junky cabin up in Lake Airhead because I love to fix up old places. It's a huge thing that I love to do and get my hands into. And this particular place has a Dutch door. And so my partner John's like, what's a Dutch door? Now John's 10 years younger than I am. So what's a Dutch door? And Sean, my assistant, says, oh, I remember that was on Leave It to Beaver. June Cleaver was always opening up the top of the Dutch door.
right,
And so, when you think about that, the servile, way of females being presented. So the advocacy press was something different to that.
a
And
different,
so, that's why it's important because right now, what's happening, Penny, you're in Europe right now, but as you come back here, you're going to find a number of people trying to rewrite history in this country. And yes, so I think it's important that we beat them to the punch. You know?
yes, I think so too. So I hope everyone will be pleased, and I felt like this was a worthy cause. So I put my effort and my resources into it, and we have a we have a record of Dennis
Yeah.
Spangler.
So one more shout out before Richard's giving us. We have 1 minute. So the 17th at Sacred Space used to be Trading Post down in Carpinteria. And you're going to have Sacred Space. It'll be from 2 to 4. Come and meet Penny. It's
It's
Summerland,
actually
right?
it's almost in Coventry, but it's at the very last business on Lily Avenue in Summerland.
Right. Okay. So it's in Summerland. Yep.
It's right, yes, right at the end of the
Okay, so
road.
come and see us. It was on the 17th of August from 2 to 4. And Penny will be there, and you get have an opportunity to get a bag if you like and see the book on Dennis Spangler.
A
And
lot of
if you knew,
people, yeah, a lot of people who worked with Dennis and knew Dennis will be there too. It's a place where people can reconnect.
fantastic. Well, thank you, Penny, for talking to me all the way from London. I look forward to seeing you on the 17th.
Yes, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Bye.